This program is brought to you by the partners of A Rood Awakening International. Help others find truth. Support A Rood Awakening International today.
With the aid of modern technology, a secret is being revealed. Those who obey the commandments of YeHoVaH and have the testimony of Yeshua have been secretly at work for centuries, and their treasure is now coming to light at the end of days. Hebrew linguist Miles Jones joins us again this week for episode 2 of Guardians of the Hebrew Gospels, because it's the end of the 6th day, the sun is set, and this is Shabbat Night Live.
As they take this message out into the world.
Well, Shabbat Shalom, Torah fans. Welcome to Shabbat Night Live with Michael Rood. Hey, Miles Jones joins us again tonight for a second episode of a fascinating series about the Hebrew Gospels and how they've been hidden over the centuries. And tonight we're going to get into why the fact that the Gospels were in Hebrew matters so much. And speaking of Hebrew matters, the new moon was seen earlier this week, and that means we are into a new month on the astronomically and agriculturally corrected biblical Hebrew calendar. This is the first Shabbat in the month of Kislev, and yes, Kislev means that Hanukkah is just 3 short weeks away. Can you believe it? Let's talk more about what is going on this month with our partner services and ministry development guru, David Robinson. Welcome.
It's wonderful to be here, Scott.
You know, it is, wow, 3 weeks to Hanukkah.
I know.
To look at the
Where did this
calendar
year
again.
go? Right?
1, 2, 3. Yes, 3 weeks and Hanukkah begins our 8 days. How about that? Well, you know, Thanksgiving is, comes first. Got Thanksgiving, then Hanukkah, and then all the other nonsense that everyone else is looking after.
What is it called?
I don't know. I don't remember. But Thanksgiving is coming up this Thursday. And that was the focus of what we had in the this month's newsletter. If you've seen it on your doorstep, you've probably had it for a couple of weeks now. But take a second look at it. Through the center spread, we had... we looked through all the testimonies we had and all the thankfulness that people have had about the ministry and about what Michael has done for their lives. And that is the center spread of this thing.
And that's just huge. A few of them. We just literally have books of these back here in this
Yeah, you mentioned you have a binder full of this kind of stuff.
Mini binders.
Like, look at that. That's just a piece of it there. And also we're going to talk about this thing you're seeing over on the right-hand side here in a second. But just to read through a couple of them, you know, I'm thankful to YeHoVaH that he called me and I heard his call. Thanks to the Almighty for he granted me the privilege of having a firstborn. And now that I know his purpose, I am going to show it to my son. And that's from Juan, which is really cool. So this is really neat where we've actually had someone on staff, Giselle and Chris, who handle our social media. They just had a son.
They did.
And to think that, you know, that little guy is going to grow up in Torah from day one.
Right.
I mean, my kids didn't have that.
Mine either.
I mean.
Yeah. And just, you don't have to unteach or, you know, what they've been taught.
How many years of Sunday school
and
all that type of stuff.
Dad, I'm still not getting Friday to Sunday. How's that 3, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And so this is a really good thing just to look at and be thankful for, and just to focus on what you're thankful for. And that's actually, you'll see a commercial for our Focus Love Gift coming up in a little bit here. But that's what Bill Cloud wanted to focus on.
Yeah.
No pun intended. But
yeah, you know, being that it's
gift.
the end of the year, you know, and we just, you start thinking about too, how am I going to support YeHoVaH's worldwide ministry, you know, whatever it may be. And, you know, if you believe in what we do here and you want to get on board with us, we just ask that you prayerfully consider getting on board with us and helping us out, because we can always use the help.
Yeah, and we are planning for 2021. We have to do that at this time of year to know what we're going to do and what kind of projects we're going to have, because there's a big project around the corner, and that is the Chronological Gospel Season 3. Our editors are working on it right now. So are we going to put this on regular television? Ted Clayton has mentioned that. Are we going to do that? Where are we going to put this thing?
That's right.
So whatever comes in kind of determines that. Where can we afford to put it on television? Because no one pays us to put it on there.
That's right. It costs us.
It costs us, exactly. So we have to do that. And if that doesn't come in, well, we put it on YouTube or somewhere else or the app. But boy, we'd sure like to show this to the world, wouldn't you?
Yes.
So that's why your support is so important. And we want to thank you if you are already supporting the ministry. And last week we mentioned something that I think is probably the easiest way to do it, other than the love gift every month, but that is the Ambassador Club.
Yeah.
The Ambassador Club, I should say. So how does the Ambassador Club work, and how does someone sign up for that?
What you do is you can call in. Of course, you can call our office, and you'll probably be transferred to Angie. Of course, anyone can help you, but Angie oversees the Ambassador Club members, and she'll get you signed up, and it's a gift of $100. Everyone's $1,200 a year. And
or you can do more if you want.
You can do whatever. Yeah, I mean, some people do a lot more, and so we can work with you on that. And the ambassadors are the core support of this ministry. I mean, we get a lot of support, and people give, but they are walking right beside us and are devoting not only their resources but their time. So
indeed, and we really want to thank you for that. And you know, Ted wrote a good letter in this newsletter for November, and it says, "What is Thanksgiving all about?" And it's about having a thankful spirit, and we're certainly thankful to you. And I'd like just to read a little bit of what Ted has written here. He just says, "We are so often quick to correct and instruct our children when it comes to the importance of saying thank you." He relates the story of Yeshua, where 10 lepers came, and only 10% thanked him.
Right.
Only one of them came back and say, "Hey, Yeshua, thank you."
Right.
And like, are we like that? Are we among that 10% that are saying thank you to YeHoVaH for the things that we have? Or are we that 90% that just go, "Oh, great," and take off and don't think about it? So we need to be among that 10%.
Yes.
So you and I are challenged, says Ted, on a weekly basis, and yes, even daily, to express our love and appreciation to the Father. If only 10% will give thanks, we all need to be among that 10%.
That's right.
Amen. Another verse that Ted says, I'm often reminded of it during this time, during Thanksgiving, is, "Praise the Lord, give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His love endures forever." One of the greatest themes of the Bible is that we are to be a people of thanksgiving, not just one particular day of the year, but as believers, we are to be thankful on a daily basis. And he says, on behalf of the Rood crew, and I'm sure you and I would agree with this, we at A Rood Awakening want to take a moment to send a note to say thank you. We are thankful for you in our lives, and we think and pray about you daily, literally, we do.
Yeah.
We always we have a corporate prayer every morning, and if a partner has a prayer request that they have urgently sent to us and said, "Help, I need help with this or that, my husband has cancer, or my wife just lost her job, or my kids are in trouble," or something like this, or whatever, we
are definitely praying for our partners every day.
Yeah. So we are thankful for you, and we just really appreciate you, and we wanted to let you know that we are praying for you daily. And again, just thanks for standing with this ministry.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, well, an author and historian, Miles Jones, takes us on another ride through the Hebrew Gospels. This is The Guardian of the Hebrew Gospels, episode 2 of 2, coming up next.
Fear, doubt, disappointment, discouragement, and anger. These are all results of focusing on the wrong purpose. If we want to see something restored, we have a responsibility as believers to turn back to YeHoVaH and focus on His purposes. In times like these, we need to ask ourselves, which side will you focus on?
It seems to me that if we are living in the days that Yeshua described, then the time has come for there to be a people unlike anything the world has ever seen or will ever see again.
Michael Rood welcomes Bill Cloud for a special teaching, Focus, available in November only. And the only way to watch it is to receive it as our gift. Donate a $50 love gift and we'll send you Focus with Bill Cloud on DVD or Blu-ray. Or for a donation of $100, we'll send you the teaching plus a 4-foot Showers of Blessing umbrella, inscribed with Acts 14:17, featuring the Hebrew name of YeHoVaH. Or as a special offer for a donation of $300, we'll send you Focus, the Showers of Blessing umbrella, plus a beautiful modern menorah with brushed aluminum finish. These gifts are available in November only and supplies are limited. Make your donation now and receive the $50 gift, the $100 gift, or the $300 gift. Remember, this offer ends November 30th and supplies are limited. Thank you for your donation to A Rood Awakening International. Call now to receive your gifts. 888-766-3610. That's 888-766-3610. Or get your gifts online at monthlylovegift.com. The Chronological Gospels Bible is changing lives all over the world, putting everything the Messiah did in exact chronological order and explaining the behind-the-scenes truth of what the Messiah did, when he did it, and why. The timing of it all means everything. And now, the Chronological Gospels can be easier on your eyes. The larger print edition features 40% larger type, and every page appears exactly the same as the original, so you can follow along with others who have the regular size version. The Chronological Gospels larger print edition also has wider margins to write notes, and the premium quality paper means you can highlight without soaking through. Plus, the larger print edition lies flat, so you can teach without having to hold the book open. The Chronological Gospels larger print edition is a big and beautiful coffee table book, measuring a full 12 inches tall and 9 inches wide. Study the Bible with clarity and ease.
I love the size of this book. This is 9 by 12. The paper is perfect because it doesn't bleed through when I write on it. I can mark it up, and I always make notes in all my Bibles. Everything is the same place as it is on the smaller version, and I can just stand back and I can teach from it, and it's the perfect size.
I pray thee, of whom speaks this prophet?
Order the Chronological Gospels larger print edition by phone or online. You'll get 40% larger type than the original. Call 800-788-7887. That's 800-788-7887. Or get the Chronological Gospels Bible larger print edition online at aroodawakening.tv/large.
The traditions that we have in modern day Judaism remind us of what we did in the temple, and some of these traditions go back long before the temple in Jerusalem. It reminds us of when Melchizedek, the king of righteousness, brought forth bread and wine to Abraham when he came back from the slaughter of kings, and Melchizedek, the Melech Tzedek, the king of righteousness, blessed the Most High with the blessing that Abraham then taught to his son Isaac, and then was passed down through the generations. Yeshua said, Abraham saw my day, and he rejoiced. He gave 1/10 of everything because he saw the broken body and the shed blood. Melchizedek, as Abraham and all of his offspring, then continued to say this prayer of sanctification. Baruch atah YeHoVaH, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, hamotzi lechem mi'haaretz. Blessed are you, YeHoVaH, our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. And Yeshua said, this bread represents my body, which will be broken for you. And this is what Yeshua said the last night that he was with his disciples. This represents his broken body that was broken for us. And then the blessing of the wine. Baruch atah YeHoVaH Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Blessed are you, YeHoVaH, our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. And Yeshua said, this is a renewed covenant, which will be paid for in my blood. As often as you do this in remembrance of me.
Recently, as you might know, the Chronological Gospels has been translated into French, into Spanish, we have Chinese, we have Russian on the way, we have things being worked on in German. I have an English Bible at home. You probably have an English Bible at home. And we assume that English Bible came from Greek, but if I were to ask you, would it matter to you if I told you that your Bible didn't come from Greek, it came from Hebrew? You might say, nope, doesn't matter. Well, I'd tell you, wrong answer. It does matter. And to tell us all about why it does matter is historical linguist Dr. Miles Jones. Miles Jones, thank you for joining us again today on Shabbat Night Live.
I'm so glad to be back.
Yes, sir.
This is such a crucial question we're talking about. The authenticity of the Hebrew Gospels. It may be a shock to some people watching that there are even Hebrew Gospels out there because they have been, really, they're assumed to be a translation from Greek or Latin.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's been forbidden. The whole idea that there were Hebrew Gospels is just an article of faith. Everything was written in Greek.
And why does it matter? I mean,
and yes, that's the second really important question about the Hebrew Gospels is really what difference does it make? And people do ask me that all the time. What difference does it make whether the Gospels were written in Hebrew or in Greek? Well, it doesn't change our faith. That's one thing that we know. But it does matter. It matters profoundly. And we're going to take a look at this because, what we just talked about, and we showed you the not only the Hebrew Gospels from Catalonia, they all conform to Jerome's testimony, who translated the Hebrew Gospels into Greek and into Latin, that in the Hebrew Gospels, they wrote up the early church tradition that it was the very stones, the lintel stones in the temple, the Holy of Holies himself, that were cracked into rather than the veil.
When Yeshua was crucified,
when
the
Yeshua
earthquake.
was crucified and the earthquake happened. Now, it's not that the veil didn't tear, but it was the breaking of the lintel stone, the huge one over the entry, and falling that caused the veil to be ripped open.
Right, because as we talked about last week, it doesn't make sense that all the shaking would happen and this veil would rip apart.
It wouldn't have torn the veil, but
Yeah.
if the lintel stone above the entryway cracked, that would do it.
Yes.
All right, so it's just a different perspective. That was what was important to the Nazarenes, the Messianic church at the time, to whom the temple was a huge thing. They'd seen it. It was awesome. It was awesome. And the foreshadowing that it would be destroyed in 40 years, it was desecrated. The Holy of Holies was desecrated by the splitting of the rocks, of the stones of the very temple itself. The veil, was split also. But we talked about the authenticity of that in the 3 verses in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But there's more to it. There's more to it because we set up what is our ideal criteria. And one of them was, are there other independent historical references to it?
Yes.
Well, there are. There's more than one. There's at least 3 that we know of. Well, according to the Talmud, in Shabbat 15a, it says 40 years before the destruction of the Jerusalem temple, that happened 40 years after Yeshua's crucifixion, the Sanhedrin was removed from the chamber of hewn stone in the temple and reconvened in the marketplace. They never went back to their absolutely, really majestic chamber of hewn stone in the temple itself because it was so damaged. It was only 40 yards away from the Holy of Holies, which was inside the bigger temple. So the damage there could be hidden. This is a cash cow. The temple is really a cash cow, right? People would come bring a goat and you'd say, well, this goat has a blemish, but for a reasonable fee, we'll take this as a down payment and give you a goat without blemish for the
A trade-in.
Yeah,
Trade-in
so they
goat.
got the goat and the price of the goat.
Yeah.
And then, you had to change your money that you gave for tithes. That's what the money changers were all about, because you couldn't have a pagan image on. For a small fee, we will change that money into money that has no pagan image
Like
in
you
it.
see today, actually, literally in an airport today. You've got the little kiosk that is a money changer, changing the different currencies of the world into wherever you're going.
Right. And so they were making lots of money. And they weren't going to shut that down just because the inner temple, the Holy of Holies, had been desecrated. They could hide that. Nobody goes in there anyway. Repair the veil, fix the lintel, and they did. All right. But however, we know that in that same earthquake, the Sanhedrin temple was also rendered, it was so damaged that it was rendered unsafe, and they had to move.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in fact, the very last judgment that happened in that temple was the daybreak decision that very day to condemn Yeshua to execution.
Really? It happened in that
blasphemy.
spot?
It happened in that very day.
Wow.
And it was daybreak in the temple. It says that in Luke, right? So that is, that year, 40 years before in 40 years, the whole temple was destroyed. But 40 years before that was the year of the 1 year ministry of the Messiah. And that's what happened. So that year from Passover 30 AD to Passover 31 AD encompassed his entire ministry and his crucifixion. So this is really the year of the Messiah's crucifixion. That is the year. And it was testified to in the Talmud. The important testimony is that it was YeHoVaH who testified to the crucifixion of his son by covering the temple in darkness, by the earthquake that cracked the temples and rendered the veil in two. So this was his testimony that this was his son. And it also damaged the Sanhedrin Council, the chamber of hewn stone, so it could never be used again.
Right.
Could never be used again. And they had to go out into the marketplace.
Wow. All these things you don't hear of. Well, I guess they are recorded. It's just as we as Gentiles don't know about it because we rarely read the Talmud, if ever.
Yeah. Right.
Why would we?
That's what I do.
That's why we have you here.
That's why you have me. That's exactly why you have me. But according to Luke 22:66, the daybreak trial where Yeshua was condemned to death for blasphemy for claiming to be the Son of God took place in the Sanhedrin Council chamber. And it was the last judgment ever made there. So that was part of YeHoVaH's testimony to the crucifixion of his son, that this was indeed his son. All these miraculous and, events. So that brings us to that question we asked. We're going to talk more about the authenticity of the Gospels, but there's a really important question here. Does it really matter if the Gospels were written in Hebrew or Greek? Okay, as far as we look, we have very strong evidence they're authentic, all right, from a original first century source, all right? We got that from the Cochin Gospels in India and from the Catalan Gospels in Spain, separated by 5,000 miles and 2,000 years, and they both say the same thing about the crucifixion, which indeed Jerome told us was in the Gospel according to the Hebrews. So that's definitive evidence to anyone who's open-minded, which a lot of people are not. But in any case, the question it brings us to, okay, they're authentic, but does it matter? Does it really matter whether they're written in Hebrew or Greek? And that's important because everything we know about our Hebrew Messiah comes to us through this Greek filter of language, culture, and thought. And that changes things. It's the nature of the beast. It's the nature of translation. And you can't make a perfect translation because no two languages and the cultures that they represent are the same. So there's going to be changes, right? But it also reflects their culture. So here's one, the name of God. And that's very important because remember, Yeshua says to his people, and there's a big, obvious dialogue that we've had here on the Rood Awakening about the name of God. What's the true name of God? And this is the weak point in Greek primacy of the Bible. Yeshua and his apostle would never, ever have changed the sacred name of God to a Greek name. And that's what they claim. They claim that, when Yeshua was teaching, he would quote from the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Old Testament. And that's pure BS, really. I mean, really, it's just pure. Just don't step in it, because that did not happen. He would have been stoned on the spot if he had done that. But he says it. You don't have to listen to me. He says it. I have manifested in your name to the men you have given me. Through your own name, keep those whom you have given me. I have declared unto them your name, and I will declare it. That's John 17, verses 6 through 26. So this is really, really crucial component. And it is the weak link in Greek primacy. Because Yeshua or his apostles would never, ever have translated the name into Greek. And we do know, actually, the oldest fragments of the New Testament that we have in Greek even have the name of God written in the Hebrew letters.
I've seen that. Nehemiah's brought that out for us.
Yes, and it's amazing. So we have very powerful evidence that this is the way it was in the Hebrew Gospels, that they used the name of God, or at least some of the Messianic scribes did. Others followed the Jewish conventions. But we know enough to know that the name of God was sacred and was preserved. So that's great. And also the name of the Messiah. It says, and it's a lot easier to see in the Hebrew Gospels, because it says, you shall call his name Yeshua, for he shall Yoshia his people. They both come from the same root word, which means to save, salvation. So you shall call his name Yeshua, because he will save, Yoshia his people. This is, Pteranomosia is the technical term for it, but it's internal rhyme is what it is. And it's meant to be beautiful and memorable. It's used in every page of the Hebrew.
It's like a Hebraic poem.
Yes, it is. Very much like poetry, internal rhyme rather than rhyming words on the end of it. You have two words from the same root that are used in the same sentence. So you have a similarity of sound and sense. But yeah, it's great. It's
like
great
we would
stuff.
do in English with alliteration.
But usually when you translate it, you lose all that.
Yes.
All right. But we know it happened. So we know that is one of the underlying, what we call a Hebrew subtext. One of the ways you can tell, it came from Hebrew.
Because calling his name Jesus, for he shall save his people, makes no sense.
But you have that. You have that in the Hebrew Gospels, of course. It says you shall call his name Yeshua. We know his name is Yeshua. Here's one that I find really, really, really important, because it's mentioned in the Bible, like Ruth 2:4 is one example. But you greet brothers in the faith by using the name of God. God is your salvation, or may God be your salvation, or God is our deliverance. God is our salvation. And this also, remember, this formulaic saying, this comes from Yeshua's own name, right? Because his name means salvation. Right. So a typical greeting, actually uses the name of Yeshua. Isn't that interesting?
Wow,
and that's a traditional greeting. Okay, well, in the Greek, they have in Matthew 28, verse 9, he is returning from the grave, right? And he meets the Marys on the road. And this is what he says to them. All hail. Does that sound Hebrew to you?
No, and it looks a little ominous and reminiscent of the 1930s in Germany, a little bit to me.
That's the Roman military salute. Okay, you slam your fist on your breastplate and hold it up in the air. All hail. Right? And the reason it looks ominous is because Hitler actually adopted the Roman military salute
is that where he got it from?
As the Nazi salute.
There you go.
He literally adopted that very same salute as the Nazi salute. All right, well, I can assure everyone out there that Yeshua did not give the Nazi salute to his followers when he returned from the grave and ran and encountered the Marys on the road.
That is ludicrous.
He did not. He gave a very typical Hebraic greeting. How do we know this? Because we have the Hebrew Gospels. We have their Gospels. We have the Gospels of the Messianic Church. They survived, right? What he said was, God is our salvation, all right? That's what he said. And now in Hebrew, that is YeHoVaH Yoshiahenu. Okay, Yoshia, it's still Yeshua, it's the same root, all right? But YeHoVaH Yoshiahenu. Henu is our. YeHoVaH is our Yeshua, is what they're saying.
Wow.
Right? Which is interesting, and that's a greeting that comes from his own name. And I want to take you to Sukkot in the year 30 AD. Now, this is really important time because you remember Yeshua went to this. He went to this Sukkot in 30 AD. Okay, and there's a whole procedure with this thing. I mean, the priest would gather up all of they would go in procession with drums and incense and lyres, and they were to be in all their finest, people following after them, and they'd go down to the pool of Siloam there, the pool of Gihon, the spring of Gihon there, and they would take from it the water of salvation. It had to be flowing water. That's what it means when it says living water. It means flowing water, because if it stops flowing, it's dead.
It's dead.
It becomes, stagnant.
And this is on the day of Shmini Atzeret.
Yes. Well, that's the next day.
That's it. All right.
This is the final day of Sukkot, the climax of Sukkot. Shmini Atzeret is the next day, and we're going to talk about that. Good point. But they take, it's in Isaiah, it talks about it, they take the water of salvation, okay, and then they take this back up, again in procession with the incense. We're making a big deal, right? But people come from all over the world. Jews have come from all over the world to this event, right? So you've got Jews from everywhere there, who traveled a long time and stayed there for this ceremony. Okay, so this is what they do. They get it back up to the temple, and they add red wine in it. Now, red wine symbolically always stands for blood.
Sure.
Okay, so guess what it becomes now? The water of salvation becomes the blood of salvation. The water of Yeshua, from the Mayane HaYeshua, from the spring of salvation, that's what they call it, comes from is now the blood of Yeshua. And at the very, very climax of this process, they pour it out onto the altar, and everyone assembled from all over the world, what do you think they say? In one voice, they say, YeHoVaH, Yoshiahenu. YeHoVaH is our Yeshua, YeHoVaH is our salvation. That's absolutely what they say as they pour the blood of Yeshua onto the altar. Well, that's not the whole story. Because this year, there was some guy with just incredible chutzpah who stands up in the middle of this ceremony and says, all those who thirst, come to me, and I will give you living water flowing out of your core, as it says in Scripture. That took a lot of nerve, didn't it? At the moment when they're pouring the...
And I can imagine it's pretty silent at that moment. The crowd is probably all just watching.
Yeah. And he stands up and says this. Can you believe it? And this was our own Yeshua. Just as they were saying, YeHoVaH, Yoshiahenu, YeHoVaH is our Yeshua. Well, you can see why Satan had to get the name changed, can't you?
Yes.
Because how many Jews are going to wake up, saying that on Sukkot, coming up? And they're going to say that, YeHoVaH Yoshiahenu, but they can't say that anymore, can they? Because we've erased the name of God. Both the Jews and the Christians have erased the name of God from our worship. What an abomination. What abomination. How many Jews would wake up hearing that?
Wow.
A lot, right? So,
surprising they didn't kill him right there.
Well, but they would just awaken.
Yeah.
YeHoVaH is our Yeshua. I mean, come on, how can you misread that? Our Yeshua HaMashiach, because is our
who's that
Savior.
guy's name that just said that? Oh, wow, that's a coincidence.
Yeshua HaMashiach is the guy who said that. So we got to ask again, does it matter? Having told you that story and translate that, remember, we're talking about a blessing that comes directly from the Hebrew, and it's in the Hebrew Gospels. God is our salvation. Does it matter?
It does matter.
Does it matter if the Bible's written in Hebrew or Greek?
Right.
You can see the Hebrew perspective, the Hebrew symbolism.
Well, it's almost like seeing a news story about somebody, like about a president or somebody who's famous or something, and you have a certain opinion about them by what you see, but you don't get to know them because you don't know the truth about them. You don't know the story behind them. You don't know how that person got to where they're at and why you're seeing them on the news, for example. That's the difference.
That's a really good point.
You
like
you have
reading
a skewed
story
perspective.
And you know all the backstory.
Right.
Well, in this case, you read it in Greek, you don't know the backstory, but when you read it in Hebrew, you see a lot of the context far clearer, like in the story we just told. But there's more.
It's like knowing about Yeshua, but not knowing Yeshua. And let's get into that. Let's hold that just for a second, because we want to get into the exciting stuff.
There is more.
There is, well, of course, there's lots more. Don't worry about it. There is lots more coming with Miles Jones. And I personally want to thank you for it. Why am I thanking you? Because you made this possible. That's the only way this happens. There are no sponsors for Shabbat Night Live. We don't have a big kitty in the bank that is supporting all of this. We don't have big sponsors. The only sponsor we have is you. And so by your donations, this show happens. And by your donations, this show happens and future shows happen, so that other folks can learn what you are learning right now. That's the way it happens. And so I want to thank you very much for standing with us, very much for you have brought Miles Jones in for us. And we're going to continue on in just a couple of minutes here. We're just going to give you a couple of minutes to pray about a donation to this ministry to help keep us going. We want to thank you for it. We'll be back in a second. Thanks again for your support of Shabbat Night Live. Your support is really important for someone to learn to know Yeshua, rather just knowing about Yeshua. We were talking about that in the last segment. And Miles Jones, we were talking about how Yeshua was at the Feast of Sukkot, and he did something very significant there. Right. But that's not the end of the story.
Right. Our question, and we got to keep this in mind, is the authenticity of the Hebrew Gospels. And the second most important question is, does it matter whether the Gospel is written in Hebrew or Greek? Because if it doesn't matter, why worry about it, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's what we're following. And I think we made a very strong point in the first one. But now we get to the day after Sukkot, and the story continues. Shimni Atzeret, it's called. Right? So on the last, what we have is, guess what? What happened on that day? They brought a woman caught in the act of adultery before Yeshua. Right? Now, and remember, they're in the temple. They're in the courtyard of the temple here. And what they want is they want him to condemn her according to Mosaic law so they can portray him, as a bloodthirsty type, instead of this loving Messiah. He's really, so dogmatic. He wants to kill some poor woman caught in the act of adultery. Well, you might remember that if she was caught in the act, there was a guy involved, and they didn't bring him.
Right. So where's the witness?
Yes, and really the punishment, they didn't often stone people for this, but that was the ultimate punishment. But it was the same for men or women. It wasn't, so where's this guy, all right? So that's kind of a tip-off to their deception. Yeshua was not fooled. But On this day, the scribes and Pharisees brought him a woman caught in the act of adultery, that they might have something to accuse him of. That's John 8, 3-5. This is probably the best known parable of his ministry, right? In fact, this is called the wandering parable.
The wandering parable.
Yes.
Why? Why is it called the wandering parable?
Well, because it's been placed in different parts of the Bible, because this was not in the earliest Greek manuscripts.
Really?
No, it was not in the earliest 100 Greek manuscripts. It was not in the earliest 200 Greek manuscripts. It was not in the earliest 267 Greek manuscripts. This did not go into the Greek canon until the 6th century.
Do we know, was there a reason why? Like, why would they do that?
Well, it's obviously, it's an authentic parable. Everybody knew it. And the reason they knew it is because it was written in the Hebrew Gospels. There are various attestations to this in the early church literature. All right, so they knew it came because it was in the Hebrew Gospels. And finally, it got put back in the Greek canon of the Bible. This is really important. We have to thank the Hebrew Gospel for this. It's not the only thing that was not in the earliest Greek version manuscripts of the Bible, but it is one of the more important ones. And of course, nobody's going to give credit to the Hebrew Gospels except for the early church fathers.
Right.
They knew where it came from. They said so.
Most folks don't even know there were Hebrew Gospels. So
right, and actually the Hebrew Gospels were considered the authentic Gospels with the most authority. They used them to settle differences in the Greek copies, right? They would go back to the Hebrew. There's several incidents of this, and this is one of them. It's in the Hebrew Gospels, it's authentic. So that's how it made its way into the Greek canon of the Bible. But it's an incredible story. And it's been placed in Luke, different places in John, finally lodged in John 8. All right. But Papias, among others, Didymus was another one who referred to it as coming from the Hebrew Gospels. So we have plenty of attestation to this, but you'll never hear it because we live in an era where the Hebrew Gospels don't exist, right?
Right, it's all Greek.
So, so we're not going to mention any of this. You would be amazed how many things get handled that way. If you just don't mention it, it doesn't exist. But the early church fathers knew it existed. So in John 8:8, the woman, Yeshua went up to the Mount of Olives into the temple. So he was in the courtyard of the temple. And this is the way they handle things, right? They would take the women who had committed adultery or the man, and they would take him into the courtyard of the temple, and they would take a chalice of wine, which represents blood, right? And they would take some dust from the courtyard of the temple where the very prophets had walked, right? And they would sprinkle it into the chalice. Now it becomes the blood of the apostles, YeHoVaH's prophets, right? Yep. It becomes the blood of YeHoVaH's prophets. And you would swear on the blood of the prophets to your testimony. We swear on the Bible, right? They would swear on the chalice of the blood of YeHoVaH's prophets. And, of course, if they believed you, you might be let go. You might be kicked out of the community if they didn't believe you or if there's other evidence. But this is what they would use. Okay, so, barrels of ink have been spent on what this means, because you know the story. You know the story, right? Yeshua stooped down and wrote with his finger upon the ground as though he hadn't heard them. And then, remember what happened? That's all he did, right? And then all of these Pharisees that were brought her to accuse him,
they all began leaving.
One by one, they just leave. So what's happening here? There's a lot of explanations. But if you want to know the truth, go back to the Hebrew perspective. The truth is that every Jew there knew that the priest was preparing the chalice. The dust of the prophets sprinkled in the chalice of the blood. Right? He was preparing the chalice. The Pharisees, would they swear on the blood of YeHoVaH's prophets?
So by putting his finger in the dust, he was daring them.
Yeah,
He's saying,
he
I'm
was.
going to pick
No,
up some
literally,
dust here.
everybody knew what that meant. He was preparing the chalice. Would they swear? And, the penalty, obvious for blaspheming against God by giving false testimony, penalty is death, ultimately.
Wow.
And they all slipped away because the Pharisees, they believed in the power of YeHoVaH. They knew that there would be a penalty for them lying. They had already lied, right? But under oath, would they swear to this? And they slunk away one by one. And he turns to the woman and says, has no one condemned you?
Nor do I condemn you.
Go and sin no more.
And it's funny that Yeshua, who is picking up the dust, putting the blood of the prophets, he would be the ultimate blood of the, he is the blood.
Well,
he would offer the blood of the prophets.
They brought him to judge. Mm-hmm. So he would be the priest, the rabbi, he was a rabbi, that would prepare the chalice, right?
Mm-hmm. And they would have to swear by his own blood eventually with that dust, because he is the prophet.
A prophet.
And it's his
he definitely
blood.
was a prophet, right?
Yeah.
So
wow.
It's so deep with
that's
meaning.
Powerful.
Yeah, so they slunk away. So he was the priest, he was preparing the chalice. And, this is so important because this was not in the Greek gospel. This was not in the earliest manuscripts of the New Testament.
Did they not get it? Did they not? I mean, why? Why would you not put that in there?
It just wasn't in there. It's an authentic parable. I know because it's in the Hebrew Gospels, and that was actually referred to as the authority for when you had scriptural discrepancies like that. Mm-hmm. That's why it eventually got put into the Greek canon of the Bible in the 6th century, like 500. Is because of the authority of it being in the Hebrew Gospels, which is amazing, isn't it?
That is amazing.
That was the authority, that it was in the Hebrew Gospels, so it survived and eventually got put into the Greek canon.
So in every English Bible today, there's evidence that there's something in there only because of the Hebrew Gospels.
And the Hebrew Gospels had survived, and they were considered the authentic Gospels, and they were consulted. When there were discrepancies, they went back at what Jerome called the fountainhead. You go back to the fountainhead. He said that. He said that about the Hebrew Gospel. You go back to the authentic fountainhead of the Word.
I find it curious. How YeHoVaH uses folks in ways that they don't even realize. And he used someone that we often malign, and that is Eusebius, for obvious reasons, creating a 3.5-year ministry and all that type of thing. But his testimony helped authenticate
It did.
Hebrew Gospels.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, no, it did.
He uses Pharaoh, he used Pilate, he uses whoever he wants to.
Jerome talked about the Hebrew Gospels the most because he translated into Hebrew and Greek. But remember, there were 75 different church fathers. There were quotations from church fathers, but there were dozens of them. There's more than 24, through the centuries. And like I said, there was no one who ever said it didn't exist until modern times, until really just yesterday. It was like that for thousands of years. And then all of a sudden, the Hebrew Gospels didn't exist. But you had many, many attestations by the early church fathers, and none that said it didn't, that challenged the existence of it. So, I mean, what do you make of that? You've got all this evidence, historical evidence. It's just been ignored because the modern version is that it was just an error first made by Papias in the 2nd century, and everybody just kept elaborating on it instead of uprooting the error, which is spin. This is spin. Spin was not invented in the 21st century. So it's spin. And there are many stories, many spinning narratives, one of which is that, they didn't even speak Hebrew anymore in the 1st century. It was a dead language. Well, that lasted until they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were 2nd century documents, practically all of them written in Hebrew, right? So that meme went bye-bye, right? Obviously, Hebrew was being spoken and being used even up to the 2nd century. So it was not a dead language. They tried to convince people everybody spoke Aramaic and Greek.
That's what I've always heard.
Very few people spoke Greek. Everybody spoke Aramaic. Very few people spoke Greek, and it never says that Yeshua or anyone spoke Greek. Well, the captain of the guard, but to Paul.
Yeah.
But none of the apostles, it never says they spoke Greek. It does say repeatedly that they spoke in Hebrew.
Now, Lucius, or Luke, as we know him, now he was a very intelligent guy. It's quite plausible that he was bilingual.
Oh
right?
yeah, he was. He was the one that I think it's Clement of Alexandria said it was Luke who translated Paul's epistle to the Hebrews, which he did originally write in Hebrew. It was Luke who translated it into Greek. So obviously Luke knew Hebrew and Greek, was very fluent in both languages. But he knows far too much about Judaism to not be a Jew. So that's another piece of spin, right?
Unreal.
So they're just, the idea that the whole New Testament was written in Greek, you got to create you tell one lie, and you got to create these other lies to cover. Well, didn't they speak Hebrew back then? Yeah, they spoke Hebrew. But you got to. So all these narratives that we get, they're just spin, most of them, and they don't hold up to any kind of scrutiny at all, especially if you know about the subject.
It's interesting that Tim Mahoney brings up this subject regarding Hebrew as it relates to Moses, and how he says, well, Moses could not have written the Torah because Hebrew did not exist at the time of Moses. And basically, he has to work backwards, as you have with the Gospels, to determine that, yes, Hebrew did exist back then, and it was entirely plausible that he did write it in Hebrew. He had to have.
So you're going to have me back, and we'll take up that topic. How's that for a fact? How do we know that Hebrew was the original alphabet of letters? We do know that evidence comes from Mount Sinai in Arabia. Yeah, so we know from the fantastic events of Sinai what happened.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's fantastic. The evidence is there. And this is another topic in which, when I started doing this, I've been called to do these things. I'm not that smart. And God has taken me by the hand and so many times and shown me what he wanted me to write and shown me the evidence. Just given me the evidence on the silver platter. It's amazing. And so it was with the Hebrew, the evidence of the Exodus at Mount Sinai. When I started that research, the mainstream attitude is that there is no evidence of the Exodus. So we can't say whether it really happened or not, Even believers can't say it really happened. Well, as I got into it, I spent 10 years researching this, and I found an overwhelming amount of evidence that the Exodus actually happened, including physical proof from the inscriptions at the base of Mount Sinai in Arabia and Midian, which is, by the way, where the Bible says that Mount Sinai was located, or as it is spoken in Hebrew, is called Har YeHoVaH, the mountain of God. It's also called Har Elohim, but Har YeHoVaH is used in Genesis, is used in Numbers, it's used in Micah. So this is the mountain of God, and it's very clearly located. So these inscriptions are the very stone speaking to us.
Now you're speaking of, let's just talk, we got 5 minutes, let's just talk a little bit about that. So are these the sandaled feet you're speaking of?
Yes, that's
okay.
Those are really significant because they were the first literate act of the Hebrews, was to placing and tracing wherever the soles of your feet shall tread, that shall be your territory. That is a command that was given not just to Moses and Joshua, but it was also given to Abraham. Right, so we'll have some really,
was too, wasn't it? Yeah.
really, we'll have some really incredible revelation on that. But wherever the soles of your feet shall touch, so these people were actually obeying that direct commandment to trace the soles of their feet everywhere they went. This would be called the wasum, the tribal sign of the Israelites. But not only did they trace their sandals, and the sandal straps are on there and everything, they also put an alphabetic inscription on them, which literally means the soles of our feet.
Now there's, what it is now, it's on the, if I'm remembering correctly, it's on the inside of the sole of the feet, so they put their foot on the rock, they trace their foot, and then they put, it looks like 3 horizontal lines on the
Yes,
inside
3
of the foot, correct?
Hash marks. we call
Hash
them.
marks, okay.
3 parallel hash marks.
Okay.
Yes, and if you put them against the instep of the foot, they actually form the shape of the earliest letter for the kaf. This is the kaf, our modern K.
Okay.
So it was kep in Egyptian, which meant the palm of the hand, actually the cup of the hand, or the cup of the instep of the foot. And of course, this has become also the name of the letter K. But it was literally the palm of the hand or the sole of the feet. Literally meant the sole of the feet. So what you have was the earliest version of this was not quite a semicircle with three hash marks to separate the fingers, which looks quite a lot like the palm of a hand, right?
Sure.
But then eventually the underlying thing got lost, dropped out of it because I guess it was a little too complicated. Well, it became a symbol rather than a pictograph, right?
Okay.
So you were left with the 3 hash marks. But when you put them against the instep of the foot, they form a perfect cup with the 3 hash marks on it. Of course, most of the Hebrews didn't know what this was the first literate act of the Hebrews. It's amazing that we have it recorded. So they just put it anywhere, but they put it. And what they're saying, remember, you shall not make any graven images.
Yes.
Okay, but so what they did is they put the alphabetic caption in there, meaning these are the soles of our foot, as we've been commanded. As we've been commanded to mark wherever we go, right? So this became the wasam, the tribal sign of the Israelites. Amazing that we have this, the first literate act of the Hebrews from the stones at Mount Sinai, particularly at Rephidim.
Wow. I don't assume we're done here, Miles. I don't. So you want to come back and do some more?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
That would be great. We've got a lot more to cover.
All right, great. Well, let's dive into something next week then, okay?
Okay, that's super.
All right, thank you. All right, well, thank you for joining us today on Shabbat Night Live with Miles Jones. We're talking all about the Hebrew language and things you didn't know, things I didn't know about it. And we hope to have you again join us next week for Shabbat Night Live. Until then, Shavua Tov, have a good week, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom, Torah fans. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with a friend. Tap the subscription button and the bell icon. And I promise to update weekly with in-depth biblical research. Be sure to download the new michaelrood.tv app for both mobile and home devices for even more commercial-free content.